Live. Okay. I'm Christine Haskell, and I'm producing Dignity with Design, a limited Dative.Works podcast series in community with Swarm about the bargains institutions demand against the backdrop of AI and the guardrails that put some teeth back into accountability. Each conversation starts with a human story, what someone has witnessed, lost, or refused, and then moves into the system serving it. Incentives, automation, metrics, and the place's responsibility goes to hide. This isn't a tools or platform talk or an ethics as branding discussion. It's an intimate, sharp reflection on the consequences of these systems from lived experiences, because dignity is not a vibe, it's a design requirement. And we'll end with one refusal and one requirement, what we won't trade away and what the system must prove to earn trust. So Clara, please share a little bit about your background and experience.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. So I'm Clara Hawken, and I work as an AI governance specialist, focused on how different organizational systems adopt technology in this age of acceleration. So I'm the co-founder and executive director at Compass Education, where we work primarily with schools, but also with health organizations and sports organizations, governments, and different global organizations on ethical and regulatory realities of using artificial intelligence. And my personal background is in computer science and AI ethics. I also have studied and degrees in other fields, but these are the ones that I'm really tuned into and using every day in my work. And very much driven by a sort of a mission-driven central question, which is how do we bring these powerful technologies into learning and the youth experience without compromising trusts and rights and also the integrity of childhood.
So Clara, I've been thinking about your essay title in a way that's almost too literal, the teeth, work, and grit, about what we owe each other. Because the story that you start with, your grandmother losing her teeth at 13 so that she can be compliant proof, isn't just a family story. It's a theory of work and a theory of worth. And it's a theory of what institutions will take from people so that the machine can keep running smoothly. I'll say that a lot of us have been living some modern version of that bargain, just less visible, more digitized and wrapped in words like efficiency and innovation. I've spent years inside the systems that claim to govern technology and watched how governance in some way, in several instances, doesn't have as much teeth as I thought it might, how values become a slide deck, how accountability evaporates into process. So today I want to hold, two truths at once: this tenderness of your story, the human cost, and the sort of insurgent question underneath it, like who is getting stripped, who is getting protected, and who gets to decide. One of the reasons I'm personally doing this with Swarm is because this is one of the few communities unattached to sponsors and donors and affiliation of any kind. And so Joaquin operates 100%, with reciprocity and in-kind professions, and speaks with candor. And so this makes a place that kind of unaffected by agenda. And so before we talk about AI, can you tell us why you began with teeth and what you were trying to name that policy language can't hold?
Yeah, fantastic question, and I think in some way embedded into what you very much picked up is that by starting with the story of teeth, we are moving away from abstract things like policy and regulation. I think story very much restores our understanding of in a way that policy language really can't capture. So in the story, what I talk about is that when my grandmother had her confirmation, which was also the end of her official schooling, and so when she was 13, she had to go out and work, as everybody else did in that country community. And her father, before she went out to serve on a farm, had all of her teeth pulled out of her mouth. And the reason why he did this was because he didn't want his daughter to go out and serve at a farm and not be able to do her work because of teeth issues, or cause trouble for the farmer that owned the location where she was going to work. So as a result, he took that decision on her behalf, and she lived her whole life from there on out without teeth. Eventually, over the years, she went through many different types of dentures until she could finally afford some dentures that actually properly fit in her mouth. But it became a lifelong issue for her. She sort of covered her mouth when she was smiling, and it very much sat with her as a painful sacrifice that she felt she had to make. On the other hand, she just as proudly would say that she'd never had a sick day in her life, and that was in fact the case when she finally became sick towards the end. The medical records office were very confused, thinking they've lost her files because they had no history of her whatsoever. And that was in fact because she had never visited a doctor, not even for when she was giving birth. So I think for me, when I think about that, and I think that in context of the reality that we live in, and the work that I do with policy and regulation, is that the teeth are really not just about dentistry. I think that as you so well said, it's about what a system is really willing to take from a person, and I think in this case, in exchange for some sort of productivity. And I think I was wanting to make that more visible, that there is a kind of trade that is hidden inside of what we think of as economic progress, but very often we trade that dignity for efficiency. And we see that in many cases, but it's often, as I'm sure we'll touch upon, at the cost of the invisible persons inside of labor. And so I think where policy to me can tell us what's compliant, what ought we to do, what is the right thing to do, what is the law, it really can't show us what it feels like to be that human being inside of that system, and perhaps a system, certainly in my grandmother's case, that didn't really see her as fully human. She was just a sort of a thing that my great grandfather, didn't want her to embarrass the family, and she was a sort of a person in the sense that she had a job to perform, but she wasn't a full human to anyone inside of her working world. And I think that, to me, the story then hopefully accomplishes that. And I think that the aim was to make that story stay with people in a way that regulation really can't achieve.
Was this, I mean, just out of curiosity, was this primarily done to women or was it done to men as well?
Yeah, that's a good question, and I don't actually know the answer. I know that my grandmother told me that it was done to other girls as well, so that it was a kind of a common practice. Because of course, when I heard about it generations later, my face was appalled, because I think I don't have very many breaks, and so when I realized that she was wearing dentures, I simply just asked her, "Why? Where's all your teeth?" And she told me the story, and I was obviously in shock about it. And she said that this was very common. She didn't have any ill will towards her father, and she definitely had bought into the sort of logic of that decision, that something had to be taken from her in order to be productive. And she had a lot of very deep respect for the need to do satisfactory work. It was really a family value that she held dearly, and that both her and my grandfather very much instituted in me as well, growing up, and talked about often.
Related to that, what do you think we inherit from that ethic? Like, what parts still help us and what parts harm us, do you think?
Yeah, it's a good question, and for me, I think what I reflected on very much was I remember in my undergraduate work reading about the Max Weber's Protestant work ethics, and reflecting on that. Work as a kind of a framing work as a kind of a calling or a discipline, and that one shouldn't understand oneself outside of that rhythm at work, and that if there was an understanding of oneself out of that rhythm of work, it was the ability to say, I have worked well, and I have been reliable, I have been disciplined, and therefore we can now come together in other forms. But it was very much an ethic that was shaped in that lens, certainly for me, and I think for very many of that generation, that this sort of quiet grit, this and a sense of humility, no boasting around accomplishment, and being restrained and dignified around work, and overall be reliable, not letting the employer down. I think those are some of the things that sticks out for me as what comes out in terms of a work ethic that comes out of this story. And I think it resonates with me because I also see that we are in a shift around that understanding. As I was growing up, very much it was the case that people were on the way to retire or had retired from work where they had been in the same work location for 30 or 40 years. Some of the office workers had gotten a gold watch as their retirement present, and that was the goal. But now I think it's quite common for people to sort of jump from work to work. Certainly in the tech industry, if you look through a tech resume of an engineer or a programmer, they jump every
Well, that's
year or two to another company. They don't have that same framework of thinking around work.
well, the loyalty's broken. The relationship is not the same, right? I mean, you were talking about the ethic. I forgot the phrase that you used, but um, the you mentioned the satisfaction, the quality of work, or the ethic in service of the employer, versus I was thinking, and so I thought you were going to say in service of self satisfaction, but you were saying it for the employer. Um, what about the self? Like, was there a sense of self? And is there
Certainly not.
harm?
Certainly not for my grandmother's generation and the community around her. You did not take your personal life to work with you.
Yeah,
Uh, and it was actually a lesson that stuck so deep with me, and still sits there, that when I got my first leadership position in an Inc. 500 company out in California, and I got one of these feedback surveys that are so popular in the corporate world, and one of the people that were on my team had written, "I feel like she can be a little aloof," and I was still in my 20s, and I went and had a talk with the president of the company. I said, "We have to talk through this because I don't think of myself as aloof. What could it possibly have meant?" So we talked through this, and I ended up just frankly asking the employee where, what is it that stuck out? What is it that I do that strike you as aloof? And she said, well, I come and I tell you sometimes I'm late because my kid has hurt their knee or spilled their milk or my car broke down, and then you just dock me 10 minutes or 15 minutes because I'm late, but you don't seem to care about my private life. And what I wanted to say was, I don't, because we're supposed to be working. But I realized that it was a generational
Yeah.
thing there as well. That, for her, I had hired a whole person, and to me, I had just hired a role, someone who could be replaced. And I really had to sit myself down and have a serious conversation about what it means to hire human beings and support them in their roles, and that you don't leave yourself at the door. But that was very much ingrained with me,
Yeah.
so I had to actually sort of reverse course as
Yeah.
part of my own leadership development in my early years of leadership.
Yeah, actually, I think that was a huge learning between the Gen X and millennial generations, and I came up around that same time where we were taught to leave ourselves at the door and then bring our whole selves to work, and we actually had no language for that. We had no language or skills for that, and you were supposed to just know the answer and you have no sense of self. Like the company didn't care. Like there was no, you could have a death, you could have, all kinds of calamity happening outside, and there, like, I had a boss that was like, leave it in the car, like it doesn't matter, don't care. um and when I read your piece, I kept thinking, this is what happens when work, this is what work looks like when the institution owns the terms of your dignity as a human being. And you write, invisibility, sorry, can erase you. And what does invisibility look like now? When where does it show up now, do you think?
Yeah, I think it's a fantastic question because I did make that statement that invisibility can erase you, and I think we see it in a couple of different places. So one of those places are on social media platforms that are focused on professional work, like for example LinkedIn. Where if you are not featured there, and if you don't have a digital existence, then you in many ways simply just don't exist. You're not represented in the real world. When HR goes out and looks for talent, they go online to verify and check and see what are other people saying. And I think in hiring systems, especially in any kind of sort of platform work or any kind of environment where algorithmic filtering decides who gets seen, being invisible will erase you because these systems, including these sort of AI hiring systems, are designed to filter. So I think if your work in establishing a digital trail or the actual work that you do doesn't produce the sort of kind of the right kind of data trail, then you just don't exist in the marketplace. And I think companies certainly know that. This is why we SEO optimize websites. This is why we want to be the first 5 out of a Google search and so on. But there are real people that are really being erased. So I think that, one of the things I talk about is that the people that are most at risk for becoming invisible or being invisible and then not being able to return to work could be something like caregivers, parents, or guardians or grandparents who are returning to work. It could be older workers that don't really have this kind of digital trail of work. It could be people that don't have these polished digital profiles, but it could also be individuals moving to different countries, or perhaps people with a record that are returning from a prison environment into wanting to re-enter into a working environment, that are essentially filtered out before a human ever gets an opportunity to evaluate them. And unfortunately, we are hearing more and more cases, I think, especially of younger people that are articulating very clearly this experience. They're applying for work online, and then within minutes, they get an automated response. Thank you for the application. We've reviewed it carefully. You're not a fit. And what happens is that it's the ATS filter that has filtered them out because they don't have the right kind of digital trail, or this sort of polished digital profile that allows for the algorithm to identify them as potential talent. So it's not dramatic in the sense that we immediately sustain a harm. It's kind of quiet, but it is very much happening, and that's precisely why it's so dangerous. And I think very important for us to talk about who is it that is becoming invisible in this digital world.
I don't know if it's quiet. I almost see it as this, almost like a dog whistle. Like it's loud. It's loud to a lot of people, but I don't know. Maybe it's one of those shrill things. As you were talking, it made me think of the teeth as even a more visceral sign of identity, because I know they didn't have forensics, back in when they were extracting teeth, but it was her identity, literally her identity, her DNA. It is how you identify human beings, like to the person, and they were extracting that, and I just blows my mind. What are people being asked to give up today to stay employable? Identity, time, privacy, voice. What do you think they're being asked to give up?
Well, the first question, I think, is a sense of being able to apply critical thinking to the changes that happens to the reality of your work. So I can give you an example. We hear very much that there are certain areas of work that are lacking workers, and that therefore those roles can be replaced by AI. So these are jobs that can be relatively easily automated, and because there are a need for more people who can do automated work, and we don't have them, let's just replace them with AI. Those people, certainly the ones that are still inside of the working space, I think are first and foremost given up their sort of critical thinking, or their freedom to do critical thinking, and then a sense of agency that they can have a positive impact, or a meaningful impact inside of their work. This kind of language, I think, leaves people very much with the sense that if I can be automated away, then I am worthless. I am replaceable. My work has no meaning. And I think, we come from a long history of people very much finding meaning in their work, and I think that that sense of security that comes with, or self-esteem often that comes with someone saying, I have a job and it means something to someone, when that is replaced by a story that those people can be easily replaced, I think we lose something very essential. There was a CEO, Ken Iverson, I think was his name. He was CEO of a steel manufacturing plant, I think up in the Midwest, or middle, somewhere in the northern part of the USA. And he comes to mind because he had a kind of sort of a pretty simple principle about the people that work with him, is that, look, we're doing this together, so we are part of the same system, and where each moving part depends on the other. So when we are doing well, then everyone shares the upside, as in everyone. And when times are kind of bad for us, then we all share the pain, but that we are working together. So and I think one of the stories that is often talked about in universities around the world, in business colleges, is that they were experiencing a downturn where he then said, look, what we're not going to do is get rid of human beings. We're not getting rid of any people. We're going to figure out how to get through this downturn without laying on anyone off. So he reduced base pay for all employees. The senior leaders took the bigger cuts, and then bonuses were either cut or eliminated for a period of time, and a small group of people took a voluntary early retirement. But it allowed for him to not only keep his sort of workforce loyalty really high, but also continue productivity, and then also recover, because he didn't just had to cover economically. He didn't have to worry about recovering the moral of his workforce. And I
Well,
think it's different leadership style, that what we hear about and what we see when someone says we have jobs that can be automated away. And I think that we need to have that conversation there now, before it is too late for us to really talk about what is it exactly, again, when we're sacrificing teeth for the benefit of
yeah,
productivity, but
so,
when we're sacrificing human beings for the benefit of productivity, what
yeah.
is it really that we're sacrificing?
So
And
if I were to
that conversation I very much want to have.
so if I were paraphrasing, I think what you were saying was that we're sacrificing aspects of our agency, and that the use of AI, um, when you were talking about critical thinking and agency, it was the lack of friction that AI is reducing our critical thinking and agency, and that there's a fear of being replaced, which is very real. And then there was some comments from the audience. I think it was Sima, if I'm not butchering her name, mentioned that lately it feels like we can't really voice our opinions at work. So there's this kind of quieting that's happening. And I got it, Joaquin. There's this sort of quieting in the workplace that's happening. That there's a fear happening where we can't really be open anymore. So that's another agency reduction, of like, can't we talk openly anymore? It used to be that, you know, in this IQ period of time, in the compartmentalization that you and I were talking about earlier, when EQ skills were lower, there was a higher debate culture, that where people were thrashing ideas more, and different opinions, truly different opinions, like we should not do this with AI, or like, this is wrong, or this goes against the customer, or there were more debates happening around what should or shouldn't be done. Even if they went ahead and did the debate still occurred. um, the debate seems less likely to be happening, or if it does, it's highly performative and everyone knows it. And that's what Sima seems to be gesturing toward. And is that sort of what you're also talking
Yeah,
about?
absolutely. And I think Simon mentions freedom of speech, and I think that there are certain things that we have begun, I think, to assume or take for granted, including freedom of speech, including rights to privacy, and so on. But those are very severely undermined in today's technology, and perhaps to a much greater extent than we ever think
Yeah.
that would happen. When you talk to Generation Alpha and ask them about privacy or ask them about freedom of speech, they kind of roll their eyes and go, "We don't have it, right? It's just not part of our world." But I think that it is very important for us to have a workforce that can speak freely, and that can articulate that without this risk of simply being replaced. I think I read a story out of San Diego from the sheriff's department there, and they were very excited to talk about an AI that they're using now to take non-emergency calls. And so when people call the sheriff's department for non-emergencies, they talk to an AI. They're not talking to a human being, and then the call is routed from there. And they were very happy about it because it would give the dispatchers, the human dispatchers, more peace and quiet and downtime for to rest between emergencies, and they would also avoid getting some of these calls that really should have gone to the police department, not the sheriff's department. And I searched high and low for feedback from some of the unions or from some of the staff that works inside of the department to find out what do they think about it, because I certainly spotted a problem. But there's nothing there, right? So there's just a story about how wonderful AI can be, but there's not a story about we're not really working less or resting. We're just getting, less employees doing more calls, or we don't want to be replaced by an AI, even if we're understaffed. We would rather have a human being in that position. And I think when you have gotten the message that you can be replaced by an AI, you are not going to be the one who speaks up freely or loudly to raise concerns about it, because it's too easy to assume that you can be replaced by someone else.
And it also brings up, what stats are they being judged by? Like, what scorecard is running their show, and are those incentives driving them in the right direction? And how data driven versus data informed are they making their decisions? So if you're still with us, this is Dignity by Design, a limited series in community with Swarm on the human cost of AI systems and the guardrails that make accountability real. I'm with Clara Hawking, an AI governance specialist and speaker who recently wrote a very personal piece on questioning what algorithms decide about who gets left behind. And because grit used to be enough, particularly the grit of invisible work. I think we've just wrapped up now how it can be used as a trap. And so where do you see the rule of nobody, decisions that harm people but belong to no one? And I can elaborate on that if you want. Do you know what I'm talking about? Maybe I should go a little farther for folks in the audience. Like if you've ever been stuck in a loop with customer service bot, kind of like how you're describing with the police force with this AI, like talking with it, I cannot stand getting on the phone and ending up with a bot, an AI bot. Or you've been told by a human, even a human clerk, I'd love to help you, but the system won't let me. And the sort of feeling of hitting a brick wall made of paperwork and algorithms, that's the rule of nobody. And in the old days, if government was cruel, you could point to a king or a dictator and say, that's the guy, he's the problem, I want his head. But in the rule of nobody, that's a little different. It's in the modern version of tyranny, it's creepier because there's no palace to storm. It's in this system, power is spread so thin across so many bureaus and departments. It's the standard procedures that if something goes horribly wrong, nobody's responsible. Like, we kind of are beginning to get there now a little bit. Well, actually, we probably already are. Everyone is just sort of a cog following a manual written by someone who doesn't work there anymore. That's what the rule of no one is. So where do you see the rule of no one right now?
Well, the first thing that comes to mind when you're describing that is social media, and especially in the context of children using social media, when they get hurt in that environment. And we ask who's responsible, everybody seems to sort of throw up their hands. I think Meta was on trial here recently, and stuck to their narrative that it's user error. We saw that also with OpenAI and some of the legal cases that their lawyers say, well, it's the user's responsibility. And it reminded me a little bit of this OxyContin scandal,
Yeah.
where the Purdue Pharma was essentially doing the same thing. It wasn't the drug that was addictive; it was people who were using it incorrectly and abusing it. And I think that there seems to be no one where we can kind of grab them by the ear and say, "What are you doing?" And you're responsible for this, and you're responsible for hurting all these people, and you have to be accountable to it. I actually wrote an opinion piece about it to the Washington Post here not too long ago. They sent it back. They said, "No, we can't post it. It's too much." But actually, sort of making an argument that I think we are moving towards a point where we need to identify this not just in civil cases where the law stands and who's responsible, but also criminally identify who's responsible when large language models go awry and give dangerous
Yeah, but
advice.
I don't care about the Washington. Bezos owns the Washington Post. Like, send it somewhere else.
No, maybe I'll send it to you, then you can read it. But I think that
I'm saying.
there was a case. It struck me because there's a case out of Massachusetts in, I think, 2016, 2017, where a young man took his own life. He had tried 4 times before. He was struggling very much with depression, and every time he reached out for help, he reached out for help through his phone. And the messages he was getting back were things like, try something else. How about you do this? And, stick with it. Don't go ask your family for help. They don't care about you anyway. And
Yes.
I remember when I heard the story of a young man Adam Rainey, who had lost his life having a conversation with a large language model. I thought, I've heard this before.
Yeah.
And then I went back to this story, and the difference was that the Adam Rainey was talking with a large language model. The young man who took his own life in Massachusetts 10 years earlier had been talking to a human being, but she was actually arrested and later found guilty for reckless and wanton behavior, for having encouraged him
Yeah.
to take his own life, and she was convicted of manslaughter. And I thought it just was so parallel that I thought, to your question, who is responsible, who holds the bug, and I think that at the end of the day, we have to ask whether it's not the CEO of a company that ultimately takes on that responsibility when they take on the
Yeah.
paycheck as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the paper that, when I wrote that paper about the triangle that the user is in, they think they're in a dyad. They think they're in a two-person relationship. Those teenagers think they're only talking to having a private conversation with that don't even think it's a large language model. They think it's an intimate conversation. It's a girlfriend or boyfriend, or the woman in Japan married a robot, right? Even if it's a subscription model, they're in a dialogue with over 50 people. They have that robot, but then there's a whole committee of governance people and UX people and product people and the CEO themselves who determine what those incentives are and what that user experience should be, and just how manipulative, like the level of manipulation that person should be engaged in, and almost like a game, level 1, level 2, level 3, level high level of manipulation that they should be engaged in order to keep them paying. And for the person to take the stand, I forget who it was, who said, "I'm sure I have been addicted to a Netflix series, and that this is analogous to that." Is I don't know how they sleep at night. I do not know how those people um, get square with I don't know how they compartmentalize their work and life. Um, But
And I think very much, you know, and certainly I know that I'm biased here by my work in ethics and being an ethicist, but I think it very much goes to what Simon is saying in the comments, that you know whistleblowers should be heroes, and that they're now demonized, and as Oliver says, that victim blaming is becoming more common these days. That you know there's a story that is being told when things go wrong, that is the user error, it's on the user side, although most users don't have, they might have some awareness of how things generally work, but they certainly don't have the competency to give consent, because no one can understand the terms and conditions, or the privacy agreements anyway. um, but I think then on the other side, you have employees that are working inside of an environment where they know that they may very possibly very quickly be replaced by an AI. So they're kind of clinging on to their work. And when you know that you can be replaced quickly, you're not going to be stepping up to be that whistleblower, because you don't have any kind of sense of security in that space. And so you silence yourself, and if you really don't like it, then you circle into to another company or another corporation. But how you adjust that moral compass every day, there are situations where I wonder that myself, about many of these organizations that are working in the field today.
well, the whistleblowers should actually truly be heroes, but the whistleblower, the single whistleblower idea is actually fading. And I just gave a link to Joaquin to share. The walkout is actually becoming more popular over the last decade, maybe 15 years to decade. Um, Collective action is becoming more popular, because they can't fire all of us, I think, mentality. And I don't know if Joaquin's still there, but I'll share it. If he doesn't share it now, I'll share it after. But the it started with the Google walkout. There's been other walkouts around the globe in the UK with I think the Uber drivers had it. I have links throughout the whole article. Um, and with the march, the No Kings March, like all of these marches are examples of that, where so that the single whistleblower doesn't feel so isolated, because the market right now is so tight that there isn't really anywhere to go, and the employer knows it. And so that Google walkout was so seminal, because it actually did force, so many people walked out, that it actually did force some language change in their policy, which is pretty rare. Um, because when these infractions are going to be committed, like a Cambridge Analytica or many of the lawsuits that happen with a lot of these social media products, the policies are there. It's not like the governance people didn't predict this was going to happen, right? And the business people are saying, so warned, we're still going to step over the fence because our business incentives are dictating that we do this. The CEO is dictating that we do this. It all goes up to the CEO level and the partner level for decision, right? So, and the governance group knows that's going to happen. So we go through this little French minuet, of conversations, knowing that this is what's going to happen. Um, and then at some point there's a tipping point where people just can't live with themselves knowing that this is going to happen, and the walkout happens. And I'm so happy to see more of those occurring, because it's the only way that change is going to happen, because the embarrassment, the PR embarrassment, and the more frequent PR embarrassments are the only way this is going to continue, this is going to shift, because it's a nuisance. It's the nuisance that they need for these kinds of shifts, rather than the single person on the cross on a 60-minute. That's why they're buying 60 minutes, because even that doesn't matter anymore, right? And the Colbert, like these the shows that mattered kind of have been neutralized, right? And so these collective walkouts are the only things that are gonna cause that type of shift, until they replace us all with robots, which is the dream, because they don't want they don't want us to squeak. So that's why they're taking our teeth. So when AI driven decisions go wrong, who can be questioned by name now, do you think?
Well, it depends on where in the world you are, because in some places in the world, when AI decisions are going wrong, so for example, in the European Union, the organization is accountable for that. They are required by law to have a human in the loop for those high stakes decisions, and they are required by law to be able to explain how a decision was made, even if it was made by an algorithm. And if they can't do that, then they're not complying with regulation. It's not the case everywhere, but there are other locations that and jurisdictions that are working towards this. South America, Brazil, and Peru comes to mind. Saudi Arabia has been working on some regulation.
Mm-hmm.
China came first, really, with regulation around algorithmic decision making and responsibilities. In the U.S., the individual states, not the federal government, but individual states have started working on this, including Colorado, I think, came first, but others are following. On wanting to identify exactly who's responsible when something has been mediated by an algorithm, and that algorithm got it wrong. And so I think on one hand we have regulation, some regulation that can help identify exactly who's responsible. Is it the
Well,
organization? Is it the CEO of the organization? Who is it? And then, of course, we have the moral issue, the ethical issues, and the issue there is, to what extent can they survive these decision making? And unfortunately, that becomes a bit of a theatrical event. I think I was thinking of the this isn't AI, but the Murdoch family, for example, how they have survived some of these scandals, including with a big gossip newspaper in England, where they were hacking into people's phones, and somehow managed to get out of that without directly affecting any of the executives. Other people went on the chopping block for that. But I think we are definitely in that space where we are moving from saying, is this ethical? Is it worth it? Is it okay for 5 people to become multi-billionaires, and then 500,000 people in Nigeria suffering from PTSD because they did the invisible work and they're replaceable by AI? Or is it how many children do we want to see harmed by bad advice they're getting from large language models before we say this is unethical, it's immoral? I know in the US market recently reacted to a decision that OpenAI made to go into a contract with the federal government around using their AI for military purposes. And the public reacted by closing their accounts, a moral, ethical framework. But I think as we begin to see more and more regulation, I think it will be much easier for us to pinpoint exactly who's responsible. And we ought to be able to do that, because this technology has real possibility to cause very serious harm to a large amount of people very quickly.
well, so you said a lot, and I want to parse some of it. I think whenever we use words, the phrases like the organization, we need to we need to unpack that, because we should be looking at the officers of the organization, and I look at them as responsible for the decisions that they're making. How is it that they can determine the business incentives of these products that have absolutely no alignment with individual or societal health and well-being, and that research has proven over and over and over and over again, and then we go and regulate anti-regulation, um, which is okay, but we've proven that these products are harmful, so that we're driving these products without seatbelts, and they aren't fully safe. Then that officer and their leadership team are directly responsible for the systems that have AI in them, and they're making decisions, business decisions on them. And they are, I can't use the term legally liable, right? I know I can't use that term because whenever I dealt with legal in data governance um, policy language, like that was the big no-no, right? I know I have to stop short of that, but they're accountable for the business, and I stopped short of that in my paper too, like the legal liability, but they are accountable for the business and business decisions, and they are accountable for those uh, data structures, and within those data structures are AI, like biased AI data systems, and they're accountable for those. So if that's under their jurisdiction and set of responsibilities, the buck stops with them. And yet they get these golden handcuffs, and fine, if that's in their if that's in their signing structure, and they get nice out clauses, great, but they're still accountable for that. So when they take the stand during their tenure, they're the ones responsible. It's not the organization, it's the CEO during that tenure, right? Wouldn't you think?
Well, well, I would like to say yes, but unfortunately, we have no case law and to guide us, and we have that very hotly debated where, when it comes to corporate social responsibilities, where does it really lie? Some go as far as to argue that organizations can't be a morally responsible entity, so that the whole argument for them would be a washout, that the only moral responsibility you have is to your shareholders, and you need to make them money. And so we're dealing with a very divided water there. I think in my experience, what I often see when people ask me, why should we hire your company, why should we use you, what's in it for us, it is because they are investor driven, and they need to be able to go back and explain why they are spending money on something like AI governance or AI ethics, or AI safety, because it doesn't immediately sticks out as something that is valuable. It's better to produce, develop, move fast, and break things, as they say. But I do think that the answer, Christine, will become clear as we go forward. For me, I do see an enormous value in trust. I think that's also some of the things that Simon is referring to in the comment section as well. That we see this sort of widening. Understanding between big data companies that are not very interested in the teeth, as Simon says, and then the public, who are starting to see that they are very interested in more protection, and that bad things are happening to them because of this technology, not just losing their jobs, not just losing their children, but decisions that are bad decision makings in social service agencies, or algorithms that are pushing out continuous bad harm, or contributing to global conflicts, or even local conflicts. And I think that trust, I know I've said that before, but I'll say it again here, is, to me, AI is not the new electricity. Trust is the new electricity. It's the grid of
Mm.
trust that ultimately becomes valuable. And I think that as these AI companies continue to bruise forward without building that relationship with the global community, and trust begins to break down, I think that will be costly on the other side. And I think the recent reaction to OpenAI and so many people closing their accounts, a significant number of people closing their accounts in just a few days, shows exactly that. We
Yeah,
have to maintain that human relationship, and we need big tech to care about the human beings, not just say that they're building democratic AI, but that they really care about the human beings that have to live with the consequences of that AI.
yeah. Um, Well, both of our playbooks, I'll just start with yours. Your playbook is unusually practical. What's the first step that actually changes outcomes?
So yeah, so I think when I go into an organization, the absolute first step is to find out how are you using AI. So not what's in your toy box, and not are those toys safe, but how are you playing with them? How's your staff using AI? What kind of technology do you have in this organization? And that can actually be quite tricky to find out. There's an enormous amount of employees that have opened their own individual accounts and use them for work. Little informal systems have built up over time where people have become dedicated to a certain way of using technology and are reluctant to let it go. But that picture, that map of the technology needs to be really clear. And then our next step is always to say, all right, let's talk about what's your vision, what's your mission, what's your values, and how can you use AI in a way that aligns with those things? Because unless you have figured out exactly why you are using this technology, you probably shouldn't be using it. And I think we see that very clearly with the number of companies already that are struggling with just amazing amounts of digital debt. You know, subscriptions they've assigned to technology they have built in, AI projects that they have run that have immediately fallen flat. So I think for me, the starting point is always there. And if the company's mission and vision is something about protecting the environment, or uh, 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 aligning with human rights, or uh, uh, honesty and sincerity, whatever it might be, right? So if any of those things are in there, then it almost by itself very quickly begin to build a strategy for the organization that is much better aligned with how they're using this technology. It becomes more conscious choices that they make when they pick the technology to scale inside of their organization. So I think those are the starting points. And I ask myself that as well when I use a new technology. Why am I using this technology? And is my use of it aligning with my values and my mission and my vision?
And I think we're coming to a close. So I will just end with um, one small ritual for the series, one question people can use as a pause in real life. What would be yours?
Yeah, it's a really good question, but I have to excuse myself, Christine, because I was distracted by
Oh,
Michael and Simon in the comments
oh,
having a chat,
okay.
and I thought, oh, this is so important. We need
Okay,
to.
no, no, I'll offer mine then as a close. It's okay. Mine would be who becomes invisible if we continue to do it this way. So that would just be one place to sort of pause. But it has been a true pleasure to chat with you today, and I appreciate you giving the time. I know we've had it's the time has gone by so quickly. It's been a very lively chat, and I appreciate everyone's comments in the side, and I'll do my best to go back over them, and I will try to offer a little resource later today as part of the close out of this. But thank you very much, Joaquin, for hosting this. And look us up. We have our links, the links to Claire's article, and some of my materials are there. But thank you all for your time. I really appreciate it.
Yes, thank you so much, and thank